Welcome to Pod Me If You Can. Today we're going to be talking about the Australian film Pawno that was shot in Footscray in Melbourne.
Pardon me if you can. Movie reviews.
This is the first feature film for director Paul Ireland and writer Damien Hill. It's an independent low-budget film with 12 central characters. There's a beautiful 4-minute intro where you see all the streets of Footscray, and I've been to them. I live in Melbourne, and I thought that was handled beautifully, and it's great to see those familiar scenes, streets and everything on camera. And the film takes place in a pawn shop where the owner, Les, played by John Brumpton, who's kind of a poor man's Brian Brown in this film, interacts with various locals. The writer Damien Hill actually plays Danny, who works in the shop and has a crush on Kate, played by Maeve Dermody. Most of the characters are down on their luck, and as I said, Footscray is very multicultural and sometimes has a poorer class of citizen. At the halfway point through the film, we meet Jason Spears, who's played by Brad McMurray. He needs $9,000 for a watch, and he leaves the shop after a full-on fight with Les and Danny. This big action scene is completely different tonally and creates this weird tension, or it did for me, where the entire rest of the film I was waiting for him to come back. I was sure that Jason was going to reap his revenge and, as he says, bring back the boys from his crew to torch the pawn shop or bring them down. I kept thinking that Les would be killed because the shop is so secluded and because he vowed revenge, but there are no consequences for this violent act in the middle of the film. Les is fine, and it doesn't particularly matter that he beat somebody to a pulp. The film takes place over one day, and we spend more time with some characters than others, which leaves some subplots very underdeveloped. We meet Carlo and Paulie, played by Malcolm Kennard, who people might remember from Catching Malat, and Mark Cole-Smith. They're very enjoyable as these street beggars / drug addicts, and they get quite a lot of time, so we really feel like we get to know them. There's unfortunately some other characters we don't get to know so well. So there is a transgender character named Paige, played by Daniel Fredrickson, and he feels underused within the context of this film, almost a novelty. There's bookshop workers Kate and Holly, Maeve Dermody and Naomi Rukavina. There's an Indian cabbie named Harsha, and they all have relatively small roles. This needed probably half the characters, and to beef up the remaining characters' scenes. I feel like I got a sense of who the two drug addicts were, as I said, but who live on the streets. But most of the characters, I feel like I was being made to invent and fill in the blanks to their backstories and what they had going on. And I know, yes, you're saying, I believe the audience doesn't need to be spoon-fed and that they'll be able to follow the plot. That's fine, but that doesn't mean I'm going to form any particular attachment to these characters, because I don't really get a chance to know them. I'm just dropping in on a few scenes within their day. Kerry Armstrong is a fantastic Australian actress, and people might remember her from Lantana, among other things, but it's not clear why she's in this film. She really only gets 2.5 scenes, and not a full story. She's a mother looking for her missing son, and there's really no payoff to this storyline. It's just sad additional reality. This feels like the kind of scene that would be cut for pacing. Her whole story arc feels like it would end up on the cutting room floor of a stronger film. You could have combined sort of many characters and kept story threads here. The girl in the bookshop could have been looking for a missing brother, which could have had the same tone or story as the Kerry Armstrong missing son story had. There was this repetitive trope where Vance Joy's song Riptide gets played by this girl busker. It's like she doesn't know another song. It's very repetitive throughout the course of the film, and it would have been great to see some more variety in the soundtrack for Pawno. Maeve Dermody is probably the best thing about the film. She's very watchable and very beautiful. She really steals focus when the camera's on her. Her character was very undeveloped, though, as most were. Here's everything I know about the girl in the bookshop, played by Maeve Dermody. She owns glasses, she can read, otherwise she's an empty vessel, and no one has written her a poem before. I want to do some quick spoilers here, so if you haven't seen the film, I'm just going to be doing some spoilers here on the plot. The whole transgender man storyline feels underdeveloped. I don't know what his backstory was. You'd have to sort of guess. I don't know who that guy was proposing to. This guy comes into the pawn shop and needs a cheap ring, and he gets one, and then he just walks off happily, and we never get to see who he's proposing to. It's just a nice gesture that they give him a discounted ring. There was a guy who's sitting in the pawn shop and he wants a gun. He wants to kill himself, and it is unclear why. We get to see one wedding picture where he presumably didn't have a great marriage, or his wife has left him, and that's made him want to kill himself. Again, we don't have all the facts, so it's really difficult to attach ourselves to him as a character. It could have, as I said, the writing, we could have had somebody else kill themselves, somebody who we got to know, you know. He was there was no attachment to him. He was a tiny character who hung out in the store that afternoon. Jason Spears, the tough character who gets beaten up, there's a sequence where he gets grabbed in front of his kids. He needed $9,000, but he had this fancy car. I don't know why he didn't try and sell that before it gets stolen later in the film. His watch seems to be the only thing of value he thinks he can pawn off, but he's in this life and death situation, so it didn't really make sense to me. As well, Paulie, the boxer, one of the two street thugs, he might be dead from a drug overdose at the end of the film. And if he'd had a more promising boxing career, you know, or a fight coming up, or something where we could have rooted for him, that would have been more meaningful to have his character die. But because he was just all talk, I suppose it was difficult for us to see him as anything but chatty. The main artist, Danny, played by the writer of the film, we never get to find out what stuff he's been through that's put him in this situation, because he mentions he's stable mentally. We're supposed to believe he's been through something, but we never get any clues on that. We need to invent it ourselves. He is an artist, and at the end of the film, he has this show where all his paintings are on display, and that is a situation where Maeve's character can, the bookshop girl, can come and see him, and there can be a love story there. She can see his soul through all these paintings. I thought it would have been interesting if the girl from the bookshop was one of the paintings, and then it would have been as if she was a muse, and that would have kind of developed their love story. Or if Kerry Armstrong, if her son was there, or if her son was one of the street thugs, or if her son was the artist, then we would have had some closure on her finding her son again, even if it was a bit of a scene at the end of the film. My main problem with Pawno is that the film is underdeveloped. I wanted to like it much more than I did. There's no real love story for our leads, just a poem we never get to hear or read, and a quick thank you note that leads to a kiss. I didn't actually mind the performance of Damien Hill, the writer here. I thought it was really subtle and nuanced, and he was one of the better people on camera. 2 people are listed in memory of in the credits, so it's clear the characters are based on some people that died or that the writer knew, and the feeling is that there is a lot of authenticity to this story. It does feel like Footscray, the characters are unique. It was just the plot and the amount of time spent with the characters that didn't work here. If you set up a big action sequence in the middle of your film like they did with the beating up of Jason Spears, I would like a payoff to that. The character should have come back. Jason Spears should have brought his crew. He should have got Les at the end of the film, you know. I don't feel like you could just beat people up and not have any consequence. I realise that he's kind of a shady character running a pawn shop, but I didn't forgive him for this violent action which he went through. And I suppose the point of the film is that we all have this common struggle in life, and that not everyone's as well off as you know, and that people have, you know, a lot of stuff going on beneath the surface, and that maybe we should be nicer to each other. I applaud the effort, and I look forward to seeing what these guys do next. I hope to find out that the Pawno, the film, is the start of something for this group. It really feels like it's going to work as a calling card for the writer and the director, despite it not quite meeting expectations here. I have read that some people are interested in seeing a Pawno too, but as I said, I think this would work better as a TV series, and maybe in the future that would be the best path for this story. You can find more from us at www.podmeifyoucan.com.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Check out our podcast at www.podmeifyoucan.com.